So thank you so much for joining this evening. I really appreciate all your time. Thank you so much to the panelists for taking time out and joining us. I want to quickly introduce the three of you because I'm quite excited to be having this chat. We have with us Sanjay Jesrani, who's the founder and CEO of Go North Ventures. It's a leading angel investment firm out of Hyderabad. Um, Sanjay has been mentoring startups and he sits on the board of two large companies. He also invests very heavily in sectors driven by AI and sectors like healthcare, fintech, etc. And is very sort of deeply entrenched in the investor and startup ecosystem. So thank you, Sanjay, for being here. Sanjay, incidentally, is an alumnus from the Badruka College of Commerce. So you also have a dual role to play today as an alum of the school.
Absolutely, Nidhi. Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy to be here. Yeah.
We have with us Divya Gupta, who is Associate Director at BCG, the consulting company. She leads the people and organization practice for India and the Middle East. She's also spearheading the BCG Unleash and Upskilling vertical. And Divya will talk a little bit about that. Seems extremely interesting and exciting. And I believe you were just mentioning when we started the webinar, Divya, that Pramath was the one who sort of steered you towards this direction. We'll talk a little bit about that. And Divya has has spent a significant amount of time at Intel and NASSCOM. So thank you so much, Divya, for being here with us.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Nidhi.
And of course, Pramath, Dr. Pramath Raj Sinha, he's on the panel today. A lot of us and maybe even the attendees know him and know of him. We'll definitely know of the projects that he's done. He's the founder and chairman of Harappa Education that recently got acquired by Upgrad. He's also the founding dean of the Indian School of Business and a founder trustee of Ashoka University. Now plays a much larger role in the Ashoka ecosystem as the chairman. And of course, he's been instrumental in setting up multiple educational institutions as well as programs, including the Naropa Fellowship, Anant University, the Vedika Scholars Program, and so on and so forth. Pramath started his journey, at least in the corporate world, as a consultant and was a partner at McKinsey, and then did a bunch of things in media before ultimately honing in on education and recognizing that this is the way that he's going to leave a legacy. So thank you, all three of you, for joining. Really, really appreciate it. Just to sort of begin, I wanted to say the way we will, I want to just tell the audience that what we'll do is we'll have about 30 to 40 minutes of a freewheeling discussion that I'll try and moderate. With such people on the panel, I don't really need to do much, but yes, I'll try. And then we'll leave the last part of the webinar for question and answers from the audience. So that's how we'll sort of structure this. And I'm just going to start off by asking you all, and this is just sort of your takeaways. There are two people in this room who've done their MBA and two people who incidentally haven't done their MBA. And the panel today is about classroom to boardroom, how the MBA impacts your journey. So why don't we start by each of us talking about a little bit about how your education journey has influenced your career, and two or three takeaways of how it has sort of propelled you into the leadership role or to the boardroom. So Divya, if we can start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Nidhi. Yes, I'm one of those two people who do have an MBA. Mm-hmm. So I think like a lot of people, I started my journey as an engineer. So I'm an electrical engineer and I worked with Intel, after graduating with my undergrad for almost 12, 13 years. And MBA was always on the horizon. And so I'll attach a story to my MBA's, journey. But so after a while, finally, I said, okay, you know what, I just want to start my journey with MBA. Intel approved it. They were paying for it. So I said, okay, everything was going really well. And literally 2 months before I started my MBA, I found out I was pregnant, and I was an older mom. And I found out that, okay, so the choice, my husband was actually part of the same academic school. So he also recommended that maybe I shouldn't start right now because I was working full time, being pregnant. And I decided, my father was probably the only one who said, Karlo, start it. Once you start, you will finish, you will get it done. And all I can do is almost 16 years later, till today, I am so glad I did it, because I don't think if I had dropped it at that time, I don't think I would have picked it up. So, and when I did complete my MBA, I didn't really change my job. So a lot of people, have this thing, like if you do an MBA, suddenly you have an urge to change your job. I didn't change my job. I didn't change my company, but it helped me later on throughout my career. Even till today, I feel that getting my MBA was instrumental in different things that I have done.
Sanjay, what about you? You are one who haven't actually taken that path, but your educational journey has sort of propelled you to where you are. So, what are your experiences like?
Surely, Nidhi, thanks. So I believe that I was fortunate to sort of be able to access elements which would have come via an MBA, but I have not done an MBA, as you rightly said. So a little background quickly. I come from a business family. I'm Gujarati. We came to Hyderabad down south. My dad was setting up a manufacturing industry here in Hyderabad. So I cut my teeth, early days, age 15 to 20, at the manufacturing, at the factory. So there was a lot of business all around at home and discussions. So there was one element. And Nidhi, like you mentioned early on, we both went to the same school. This is a school called Hyderabad Public School, Begumpet. So without having done anything, we have the claim to fame of Satya Nadella being our alumni. He was 2 years junior to me. Not that I did anything for him or anything beyond that claim to fame, but I like to mention in a lighter vein, right? So education, like you mentioned, Nidhi, and HPS, it was a very well-rounded school. It was an amazingly rounded education, much like an early MBA, to the extent that I like to joke with my friends. Our sort of informal motto is, we may be wrong, but we are never in doubt. And that has, helped me throughout the journey, I would say. So business family background, the school, and of course, I went to Badruka. I'm a proud alumni of the Badruka College of Commerce because I went on to do my CA, and Badruka was the flexible college which allowed us to do internship along with CA. But to quickly cover the rest of my journey, Nidhi, I think a lot of the friendships and the connections which we built in school and at college. So I I was practicing. My wife is also a chartered accountant, interestingly. We both practiced for a couple of years before we realized it wasn't a good idea for spouses to be practicing together. So I got a chance to join a very interesting startup company out of Hyderabad in a full-time position as a founder CFO. I spent 20 years, much like you, Divya. I was just part of this one company, 20-year journey from $100,000 to $100 million revenue. We were finally acquired by Hitachi Consulting, a group company of Hitachi Limited. So I had an opportunity to take this young company public, take it back private after 6 years, grow it as a private company and get acquired by a very large entity. I stayed on for 3 years post the acquisition as the CEO of the acquired entity, India and China. So I'll probably stop here, Nidhi, but I just want to end with this, that absolutely, I think education, I think elements of an MBA. So I'm all for an MBA. I believe that an MBA gives you the right element of entrepreneurship and professionalism, which is, I think, the best of both the worlds. In my Thai, I'm a part of Thai. I have a lot of entrepreneur friends, ground up, grown entrepreneurs. I have a lot of admiration for them. But I do believe many of them could benefit from a good combination of understanding how to scale beyond that 1,000 crore journey. And that's where I think this key element comes into place. But thank you, Nidhi. Back to you.
Thanks, Sanjay. Pramath, what about you? A little bit about your journey and your takeaways. And how did you get to where you are now?
So I'll just focus on this MBA story. I studied to be an engineer at IIT Kanpur. In fact, the reason I know Divya is because her husband and I were in the same batch at IIT Kanpur. And I hated being an engineer. So the refuge for all failed engineers was to do an MBA, right? And so I was very keen to do an MBA. And so I decided that I was going to apply to the IIMs and take the CAT exam. This is 1986. But I was also fascinated about going abroad to do an MBA because I had heard about the big MBA programs like Wharton and so on. So I took the GMAT, and not to boast or anything, but in those days I got a 720. So I was very happy, pleased with myself that while I was an academically a slouch at my engineering, looks like I was really cut out. In those days, you didn't know better. So you thought somehow the GMAT was a pre-qualification, right? So they were telling you that, yeah, you are good enough to do an MBA. So I was very happy and pleased with myself. But what happened was that I did not qualify for the CAT exam. I had a very poor score. And when I applied to the top schools for GMAT, they all wrote back very polite letters saying, please apply after you've got some work experience, because the US schools obviously value work experience over just your undergrad degree, and they don't take freshers. So I was pretty shattered. I thought I was built for a management career. And a long story, but I ended up going and doing engineering, and at the same university where there was the Wharton School, where across the street was the MBA program. And actually, I went to UPenn thinking that I will sort of wriggle my way into the MBA program, even though they had rejected me. As Indians, we think ki kuch jugaad kar lenge. I actually got a job with a Wharton professor who later came and taught at ISB, by the way. And then I realized that this MBA thing is not as exciting as what I'm doing with my engineering, and I ended up doing a PhD, as you know. And then ended up becoming a researcher, and I hated that. So that was another failure as an academic. But I got lucky in that I got recruited by McKinsey as a non-MBA. Now that was very interesting. We were called non-MBAs, and we were diversified hires along with all the women and African Americans and so on. And even though I was older than the MBAs, I was 29 years old, I had a PhD, and I had worked as a postdoc for 2 years. I was actually paid less than the MBAs, because the belief was that without an MBA, you will take a much longer time to become a partner because you don't have the management degree. Well, guess what? I mean, we were guinea pigs. They found that we were actually progressing as fast to partnership as anybody else, and our pays got equalized and so on. The moral of the story is that I got lucky that McKinsey took a bet on me. Not too many consulting firms in those days, now they are much more open. In those days, would hire without an MBA. And even in India today, McKinsey doesn't hire without an MBA. Most consulting firms in India don't hire without an MBA. I personally think that I just got lucky. I'm not advocating that you shouldn't do an MBA. I think the MBA would have allowed me to go into consulting, which became my ultimate career much faster. But my life journey turned out to be a little bit delayed. But in the process, I got a PhD. And the only other thing I will say is that it doesn't matter whether you do an MBA or don't do an MBA. At the end of the day, the MBA does help fast tracking your career into management. But that doesn't mean that you can never have a career in management if you don't have an MBA. And I don't know if it was the correct answer to give on this call where we have a bunch of MBA aspirants.
No,
But I'm
but
obviously a big fan of the MBA, having set up ISB and also being involved in Badruka and other institutions. Sorry for the long answer. But...
No, Pramath, actually, that's a great segue. And
Nidhi, actually, just want to add to Pramath's point when he mentioned that McKinsey didn't hire, or at that time was not hiring people outside MBA. So like at BCG, what I see today, and I don't know, I've just done my consulting career for 3 years now almost. So don't have the experience of what happened before, but I look at the pattern today with BCG. We do hire undergraduates, but mostly engineers. So it's very limited. You would not typically see people from undergraduate degree outside engineering and outside mostly tier 1 colleges, right? But with MBA, I completely agree with Pramath, sorry, he's saying that it's still, the MBA is still looked upon as one of the vehicles for fast tracking your career. So it is definitely, your pay scale is different. You get hired at a different level, because the assumption is that all typical analytical skills that are required in a consulting world, you get exposed to them in your MBA. So I would not say it doesn't, but MBA definitely gives you a better opportunity, at least starting in a career in a consulting world.
Yeah. And you know, these initial conversations are a great segue into some of the things that I wanted to dwell upon. And while the MBA is a degree, and keeping that degree aside, but there are skills that you learn that are essential for your career to progress, right? So Divya, if I may just ask, what are those 2-3 skills that you picked up during your educational journey that you use even till today, that you're really grateful for?
So I was talking about being an engineer. I didn't really change my career, and I didn't quite know when I was getting my MBA, how would I use it? But unconsciously, when I changed my, not career, but different roles within Intel, and I'll just stick to Intel for right now, I moved from being and I actually did use my engineering degree. I was a hardcore design engineer for 12 years before I moved into the business roles. So I did use my engineering, but I was also one of the people that wanted to move into more business side of things. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to get my MBA. And unconsciously, when I got into roles of sales and operations, right? And even as chief of staff to the VP of sales and marketing at Intel, I did use my business skills, right? The communication, problem solving, analytical skills, they all came in handy. And so marketing, the way they teach you marketing cases, you never think of those in typical when you're doing your engineering courses, right? When I was doing my MBA, I had been in industry for almost 12 to 14 years, right? So I thought I was a great presenter. I was in technical marketing, always presenting to the clients and all, MNCs. So here comes my communication class. And I mean, it's like the very first presentation, and literally everybody in the class, and we were doing I was part of exec MBA. So all the people in the class were like experienced people. So we all thought we were great presenters. I think the very first lecture or the session we had, our instructor literally threw our presentations away and made us feel like this little. Like we had not even a 101 of presentation skills. And, just because you don't get to learn those formal presentation skills in your undergrad most of the time, especially if you're coming from engineering degrees, right? And when the first presentation, what does he do? Counts ums and ahs, of fillers. How many times you look behind when you're presenting, right? All those things after being in that one semester, till today, I use them. I always practice my presentations. It has stayed with me, right? So when I'm giving story, and one of the typical things for consulting is slide writing and storytelling. I always emphasize that how communication is one of the most important success factors in being a consultant. And I think MBA gives you that it opens your eye. You don't realize these things, how important it is, and actually you get those, right? I mean, you could become aware of these skills. So I think that is one thing I would say, problem solving, holistic approach. And communication, I would say, a big part of where MBA really helps you in your consulting world.
And if you look at it, one is the program itself, but one is just a high quality place.
Yeah.
Being in a high quality place that sort of encourages you to be your best self. And Sanjay, you've been in a bunch of high quality places, right? Regardless of what you've sort of learned in the classroom. So how does that sort of up your game in some sense?
No, absolutely, Nidhi. So, we have shared, I'm not an MBA, but I think the whole power of your ecosystem definitely helps, Nidhi. And maybe just before that point, I want to be able to say that certain core aspects which came from the educational background, even at school, there was a focus on all round development. So we were really encouraged to read and read widely. And I credit a lot of my whatever modest progress to that attitude which was developed early on. So in our library at school, we used to get the Time magazine, the Life magazine, read about sports, discover the Popular Science magazine. So one element very important, I think, for all youngsters today is to be ready to read and read long form, not just a two-line summary of what you want to absorb. And I'm sure MBA is going to give a lot of that
And
element.
that's so hard these days, isn't it, Sanjay?
I think the whole attention span, Nidhi. I mean, I'm a co-founder of a book club here in Hyderabad. And even within the book club, sometimes we have challenges on that, right? So, and the second element really, which comes out of sports, and I would encourage all youngsters again to engage in sports at every age because one, it's a great form of social media de-addiction, right? But more important, I think it sort of teaches you to compete, but compete in a healthy form, right? You win or you lose, but you give your best. You are engaged in team sports, and there is the spirit of that team, which is so important. So I would say that whole character building, the absorption of that culture, being able to own an activity once you take it up. So several elements which I think I was very fortunate. A lot of us were very fortunate that we had some great teachers, great mentors who never hesitated to tell us what would help us. At that point of time, sometimes it seemed, a little bit of very strict or things like that. But I think you look back and you feel really grateful, including at Badruka College, right? So we had some extraordinary teachers. But to your point on the network, Nidhi, I think all the way through, again, I like to talk about what I call my 10-90 theory. I believe that 10% is what is given to you, but 90% is what you do with it, right? So a lot of us are sometimes in the middle of some very interesting people, but if you choose to not step out, then you lose that. And I'm a golfer. I was mentioning that before we started, right? So even something like my golf network, for example, I think it's amazing. I mean, one is not trying to make contacts, one is not trying to get anything from anybody, but I think that gives you a power and a sort of sense of self assurance where people reach out to you. So I'll just stop there, Nidhi, but I think it's extremely important. I think a lot of us are given the same thing, but different paths happen because few of us do things differently with what is given to us. Thank you.
Pramath, that's a good segue into your comments because you've been in a bunch of high quality institutions. How does that really change you as an individual, and why should you always strive to be in the best quality place possible?
So call me a bit snooty, but I think it's not about being in the best quality place, but it's also about being in places that leave a lifelong impact on you. I think somebody just asked the question, should I do PGDM or MBA on the Q&A? And I just answered by typing, it doesn't matter whether you do PGDM or MBA. It matters which institution you do whatever you are doing with. And the better institution you go to, the more it will transform, change, and teach you how to skill you up, but also teach you how to deliver against higher and higher benchmarks. So I do think that people often mistake this with, you are going after brand names. I think there are brand names and there are brand names. I think there are brand names that will really teach you how to be better, how to truly discover your potential. And I've been very fortunate to have done that. And I think that's what I also try to do in our education programs, that, your brand gets built on the back. The reputation of the institution gets built on the back of what is the delta that you can create in your student, right? And so I really think that I was very lucky to be in places where I struggled. I mean, there were times when I had a very strong imposter syndrome. I felt like I was not cut out to be in these places, that I got there because of the 10%, and I could not see myself doing the 90% that Sanjay is talking about. And I think all of us have been in these situations, but you want to be in those kinds of situations because that's when you are able to cross a Rubicon or a threshold, and you come out on the other side that much stronger. So good institutions do that. And I feel like I almost now seek out institutions that are high quality, because I think they test you, they teach you. And also, you've heard me say this, whether we are building Badruka or we are building ISV, I think the focus has to be on how do you change the trajectory of people? How can you get a Ranji Trophy player to play World Cup, right? Everybody has the potential to play the World Cup, right? I think all three of us are examples of that. Where we started relatively modestly, who knew that, Divya would be working in management consulting and I was working in management consulting, and our paths are so different, so different. I think when I first met her, she was like she says, hardcore engineer at Intel. I could never see her doing skilling and learning at BCG. If she had told me that, I would like, oh, come on, right? This makes no sense. But who am I to say that, given where I came from? So I think institutions really change you and change you for the better. And I think that's what education and companies you work in are really about.
And so, Pramath, then just as a follow-up, how do you choose these high quality places? Is the brand the only indicator? I mean, it's going
brand
to
is one indicator.
Yeah.
No, brand is one indicator. But like you have Badruka, which is just starting now. There's no brand, right? There's no ranking. We have students here who applied. But you look at everything. You look at the people associated with it. You look at the faculty. Who are the teachers? You look at the curriculum. You look at the infrastructure. You look at all that. So, I think education is like getting heart surgery, right? If you had to get heart surgery or some, even smaller surgery, even if you had to do a small incision on your body, you'd be very careful which doctor you go to, right? You look at the hospital, you look at the doctor, you look at what is the quality of care. You talk to patients who've been there, right? We have Sanjay here who's a graduate of Badruka. So he's a great example of, what the institution stands for. So you go talk to people, you really do due diligence before you sign up. But you don't look at one thing. There are good institutions. I look at the top 100 universities. I was just looking at the ranking of some of the universities in the ranking. Now, if you just looked at the NIRF ranking, I can tell you there are at least 20 private universities that I wouldn't touch with a barge pole, and they are there in the rankings, right? So you can't look at just one parameter, but you have to look at all parameters, and you have to pay as much attention to it as if you are going to a surgeon to get them to open up your heart, right? And education is like that. We don't realize it, but education is like surgery. For 2 years, people are going to work on you and change you. And so you want to be in good hands. So you find out everything that you can before you go to a program.
And Pramath, it's funny that you equated, doctors and faculty and so on, but it's true. Really great faculty have the power to really change the way you think and even your life, for that matter. I mean, I went to ISB. I can tell you that there were so many faculty that just inspired me in the classroom. So Divya, I'm sure you have some stories about faculty who really inspired you, and so how do you sort of leverage that? Do you keep in touch with them? What are those learnings that you got through your faculty, and how important is it to have high quality faculty in your program?
So I'm smiling when you're asking this question because my first thought was a faculty that has put this the most not the best experience. So this is when I had just moved to US starting my undergrad. And at that I'm dating myself, but we had to learn Fortran, right? And literally coming from India, not much experience in the software languages or even computer. I didn't even know how to turn a computer on at that time. And there I had taken Fortran class and faculty, since you asked the influence of faculty. The way I learned Fortran was the instructor teaching us, telling us how to do programming, writing on the board, erasing it. Till today, 31 years down the road, I have a block on software programming. I cannot do software programming. Don't ask me how I passed my C class and everything, which I had to as part of engineering, but I have this block, right? I can do VLSI, but I cannot do C programming. I cannot do any of the software language programming. So when you're talking about faculty, Nidhi, I think it really makes a big difference. And I did my undergrad and my MBA both in US. And, Pramath knows this, and you know this, Nidhi. In US, undergrad, the faculty is not really, they're just there because they have to teach. They're not really vested in undergrad teaching a lot, right? So one example is where I still have a mental block where I can't program because of a faculty. And then when I was in my pre-engineering, second year of my college, when I was still deciding between my, which engineering field to choose from, there was a computer architecture professor. And the first time I took his class, I had to drop out because, again, I had taken too much load. I loved the class, but I couldn't give enough time. So I told my professor that I had to drop. I cannot take it this semester. I won't do well, and I really enjoy the subject. So he agreed. He's like, okay, come back the next semester and take it. I took it. I aced it. And from that one class that I took because of my faculty, I pursued my VLSI design engineering career. I knew I wanted to focus on computer architecture. So faculty can really leave an impression. Same thing happened with my communication professor, right? Till date, I always go back and 3 or 4 principles that I learned from that class, I take it back with me. So I think faculty can really make a big impression on what you take away from them. And also, in some cases, put a block.
It's funny, sometimes when we are looking at faculty, I say, I don't care if the faculty teaches basket weaving, but if he can come and inspire in the class, or she can really encourage you to think beyond what you know, then that's the faculty we want you to teach. And all three of you know this, but we are getting some excellent faculty at BSM, some of them who've taught at ISB, even some of them, Pramath, who you know very well also. So I'm quite excited about this culture of high quality teaching and learning that we are trying to set up. And Sanjay, you have sort of leaned on some of these learnings even in your startup career, right? You have the people who've inspired you have ranged from like teachers to your classmates and others, and you take that into your career, especially when you're looking at startup entrepreneurs or even looking at investment in companies. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Surely, Nidhi, and like you so well mentioned and Divya covered, I think the whole aspect of a mentor, I would equate a faculty to a good mentor. And the first time I heard you speak, Pramath, was at Manthan, where you actually touched upon the importance of a mentor. It's still somewhere I have made a small note of that. So I just want to use that element, Nidhi, that I think for startups, what one often sees and one is looking for is that multiple elements of what is in the team, what sort of a problem they have picked up to solve, and how much of rigor they have brought to their preparation, Nidhi. Okay. So, to your point, what I have seen differentiated is that, yes, there are teams which, when they are well balanced, and I'm an advocate of that to all my startup founder mentees, that instead of having three founders who are all from Triple IT Hyderabad is a place where I sit on the board of the Center for Entrepreneurship. There are three deep tech, AI, computer science, computer vision experts. But what I'm always trying to share with them is that you need three elements of business to be represented in your founding team. One is, of course, the technology, because you are handling frugal capital, you want to achieve a lot. So that can be done with technology. Finance and operations, very important. And that's where a strong MBA background can help. And very important is the go-to market. I often tell my startup founders that the product is no more than 30% of the journey. And I see so many brilliant startups which are sort of wallowing in the valley of death, I like to call. Nothing wrong with their product, but they're just so over invested in the product because they are creators, right? They love to work on something which is their comfort zone, but they don't want to go and sell. And I think that's where MBA background founders who have work experience, I'm definitely partial towards work experience founders, can make a whole difference, Nidhi. So I'm just trying to sort of bring in that element of the importance of an MBA. And that's something which I often look for as I select startups which I want to invest into, Nidhi. While here, I just want to, throw in an aspect of culture, which I believe is very important. So this was a term I first heard from the Tatas, a culture of what they call dignified frugality, right? And this is something we imbibed in our own company, Sierra Atlantic, which I was a part of the growth journey of. And I like to bring that strength to my founders also, that you have your own dignity. Your dignity is yours to give away, right? Never give it away to any, it could be a large customer, you may be hiring a very senior person, carry your dignity. Frugality, again, is not cheapness. Frugality is respect for money. You will invest when you really need to invest. You don't invest because you have to show something to somebody. So I'll just end with that, Nidhi, but several elements which come together. And I think an MBA really prepares you in that multifaceted manner, which can help. Yeah.
And I think in some ways, Badruka also embodies dignified frugality in a very positive sense, right? They are,
Right.
the whole group is people who don't really believe in talking too much about themselves or what they've achieved, but it's quite fascinating, the entire journey over the last 60 years. uh, Pramath, just sort of moving tracks, there's an MBA and there's an MBA, right? There are dime a dozen MBA schools, and there are a dime a dozen MBA programs. But for the next phase of growth, etc., you really have to pick and choose what kind of learning you want, what kind of environment you want to go in. So will you talk a little bit about that and how sort of technology has become so all pervasive? You just sort of sold Harappa. It was built on the basis of technology, but all about leadership skills. So how do you sort of look at that MBA and the curriculum, and how do you choose that for something that's relevant for the future?
So, curricula, business schools, universities, colleges always lag what is happening in the real world. Academics are who are responsible for creating programs are always a few phase shifts away from the reality. But I do think that MBA programs are moving very fast to adapt, because with technology, what is getting really significantly impact, it is both what opportunities and challenges companies have in selling their products and services, but also the way companies are run. So yesterday, for example, I was on a webinar where the surveys are showing, and there was a live survey of the people who were on the webinar, that 75% of the people on the call were doing 3+2 hybrid, 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, work from anywhere. I was shocked at that number. That is the most popular way people are working today. And 75% of the people on the call were working in that 3+2 fashion. Now, if you're going to teach organizational behavior, which is a core part of an MBA program, if you are going to talk about talent and HR and so on, how can you not look at a completely new curriculum that talks about how do you deal with people who are not going to be in the office every day? How do you build culture that Sanjay is talking about when half the people are going to be remote, or most of the people are going to be remote 2 days a week? So I do think that I'm just giving that as an example of how just running companies is a challenge. And so when you prepare this MBA for the future, you have to take it into account the changes that are happening because of technology in the environment, not just that I can now sell shoes online, but also that my employees don't come to work every day and I have to still build my culture. So I do think MBA programs have to evolve. And I think, again, the way they do that in 2 ways, at least that's what we've tried to do with the programs I'm involved in. One, you pick professors who are also at the forefront, right? And who are familiar with what is going on. So they might not be exactly what Divya and Sanjay and I are doing, or you are doing, where we are actually running businesses which face or investing in businesses that have those challenges. So we see we get a first-hand feel for what is changing. But at least those professors are forward-looking, future-thinking, and they bring that into their curriculum. And I think we've always tried to have professors like that, who are not teaching yesterday's curriculum, but who are teaching tomorrow's curriculum to the extent that they can. The second way to do that is to bring practitioners into the classroom, to bring people like Divya and Sanjay into the classroom to share their experience. Now, they may not have the same academic frameworks, and they may not have a book about the topic, and they may not have nicely drawn conceptual frameworks about the topics, but at least they can tell young people what's actually happening and how they have dealt with the environment. I think learning from other people's experiences is very powerful, and it has become much more accepted in an academic environment and in an MBA program than before. So, I learned this term, Nidhi, from some of our faculty at ISB, that, these are all now pracademics. They are not academics, but they are practicing people who have become academics. And so our whole program is now populated by traditional academics and traditional practitioners or current practitioners, but really it's a pracademic program. And the third is that, you expose people to projects, you get them to internships, you get them to work not just on summer projects, but 2-year projects, so that you get a chance to work with people in the real world. You get mentors and mentorship we talked about. So the MBA program has become much richer than just being a classroom MBA. And that prepares people much better for the future world. And of course, there are curriculum changes like teaching them about digital marketing or product management, or now AI and its impact on business, and so on and so forth. But really the philosophy is that, you use whatever means you can, professors, practitioners, internships, projects, mentoring, to really prepare people for a very different management world than when the first MBAs came out 100 years ago.
And Pramath, just to follow up on this, there's also MBA programs that are taught as a day scholar program, if I may call it, right? You go to college, you come back home, and there is some merit in that. But we've always sort of promoted the residential MBA program. And why do you think that is so important in your opinion?
I don't know which text of ours talked about this, but in some of our ancient texts, in one of the Upanishads, they say that there are 4 ways you learn. You learn from your teacher, you learn from your peers, you learn from experience, learn by doing, these days people call it, and you learn by self-reflection. You learn from yourself. I think it's very powerful, and no program is complete without learning from peers. How do you make learning from peers even more powerful? You live with the peers, right? This is the old Gurukul system. This is not new, actually, if you think about it. In fact, there you live with your faculty member also, right? So I do think that the learning that happens in discussions outside the classroom, the sharing that happens, people talk about, some people come in with work experience, so they talk about what they have experienced. They talk about the contradiction between what they have experienced and what they're learning in class. I think that becomes very powerful. There are freshers in the group who've never worked. So now you have people in the group who have worked and they can learn from each other. So the learning from each other and then the challenging each other for self-reflection is also part of how people help each other. So 2 big parts of learning, which is learning from others and learning from yourself, get a huge boost when you are in a residential campus.
Thank you so much, Pramath. I think on that note, we'll move to some of the questions from the audience. The audience is asking all kinds of questions, and if I can ask some of them, one of the questions is, can you emphasize the importance of brand value of a college, like doing an MBA from a tier 2 college or a top branded college? How can they shape their career in consulting with this kind of background?
You want me to take that, Nidhi?
Yeah, Divya, why don't you talk about it?
So I would agree, at least in India, the top consulting firms do go to tier 1 schools, right? I won't deny that. But the other ways, I mean, yes, you may not get a direct placement if you're not coming from tier 1 schools directly into consulting world. I'll be honest about that. But there are a lot of different ways you can actually get into consulting world, even after a few years of getting experience, graduating, going to different companies. And that is, again, focusing on some of the skills, again, problem solving, analytical skills, communication, project management. There are a lot of different skills out there. And like Pramath was saying, the MBA programs also have to switch, and they are changing now from the traditional MBA classroom to more, bringing the industry experts in the program, bringing in the practitioners, again, sharing their experience. And then some of the topics which are relevant in consulting world, right? Like, again, same topics I'll keep harping upon, like, problem solving and communication, project management. You need to have exposure to those skills. And even if you're not coming from the tier 1 college, but if you have experiences, if exposure to these skills, these become important in your consulting track. So I don't think that brand it may play a role initially, but what we are doing as part of what I'm doing actually at BCG, what I'm doing, I'm creating these consulting programs for college students also. We call it, in a way, a finishing school. So you can learn these skills which are required in your consulting track even if you're not coming from a tier 1. So this is exactly what I'm doing. One of the proposals we are working on is with college students and saying, let's take these skills, the practical skills with practical examples, with practical component to these students when they're ready for job, right? I remember when I was with NASSCOM, we had done a study. And at that, it was for undergrads. 10% of the students graduating with engineering degrees were ready for workforce. 90% students graduating could not be hired. Now, MBA, I don't have a data for MBA. Obviously, it's probably, higher number employed because they are, learning different skills and holistic skills. But still, I think, and this is not just for consulting track. I think even in the corporate world, you can't just be a programmer and sitting at your desk anymore. You need to have qualities that you can be in front of a client, even if you're in service industry. So I would think that, yes, brands matter, but getting the skill set required for industry ready is also equally important.
I'm going to add something here, and Sanjay, alluded to it. Having mentors, having mentors sort of shatters those kinds of barriers. If you have mentors who can introduce you to people, who can, just get your foot into the door, these things really happen. And Sanjay, you are a big believer in that, and Pramath, you are a big believer in your network and mentors. So can these sort of help you go past just the brand and do something bigger?
Pramath, would you like to go?
No, go ahead, Sanjay. I'll add. You please.
Sure. No, so the way I would look at this, Nidhi, is that yes, absolutely, brand is important and it can take you sort of directly to a different trajectory. But having said that, my sort of, not a counter view, but an adjacent view is that maybe, say, Badruka is a emerging brand. It's a new brand, right? So compared to Badruka versus ISB, I mean, it's not a comparison right now, right? But I would like to tell my young friends here that, like I said, I think there are a lot of elements which are in your control. There could be economic factors where you don't want to pay 30 lakhs or 40 lakhs per year for an MBA, and you still want to go to a good school which has a good faculty, good culture, good sense of that. So I would want to give a lot of strength to such youngsters to be able to say that there are a lot of elements which are in your control. I think the whole sort of approach, curiosity, rigor, I think preparation. In fact, I'm reminded of a lovely definition by Subroto Bakchi, founder of Mindtree. He's written a book called The Professional. And in that book, he describes the professional in one line, very elegant definition. He says a professional is a person who can certify his or her own work. You do not need oversight, right? So I think as a country, India's time has come. But as a country, a big fan of India, I believe that sometimes our cheerful acceptance of mediocrity holds us back as a nation. This is something I carry to my startups also, that when you are building a product, when you are considering a service, you can compete with companies which are 10,000 times your size if you have looked at customer service, if you have looked at problems which are poorly addressed, under addressed, you can, with the sheer dint of your elegant solution, you can beat competition. And that always happens. So I would use that element, Nidhi. Brand is, of course, important. Given a good brand, I would love to go there. But if I have got into an emerging college with an emerging brand, I don't think that's a letdown. I believe that a lot can be done from what you have. Yeah.
Pramath, do you want to add over here?
No, I just want to say that I agree with everything that has been said. We should understand the reality is that higher education institutions and where you went has a signaling value, right? But it's just one aspect of education, just as I emphasize that ranking is one aspect. So the same thing holds here. Brand is one aspect. What we also have to accept the reality is that, hey, I mean, I used to play tennis as a youngster. I used to be very proud of the tennis I played, but I wasn't good enough to play for my state. And I was good enough to play for my school. I was good enough to play for IIT, but I was not good enough to play for my state. Now, you have to accept where you are at any stage in life. And then you take the best option you have. So no harm if you didn't get into an IIM or an ISB and were only able to get into a Badruka, so what? Right? Use that to get to the next stage and to the next stage and to the next stage, right? So I think that's the way to think about life. And you can't just wish that I start playing for the state one day, because my abilities are what they are. But I'm not limited by my abilities. When I went to the US, I kept playing tennis, and I think my tennis went up, but it was too late for me to come back and play for the state. So As long as you're focused on saying, let me accept the reality that I didn't get into CAT. MBA schools did not give me an opportunity. So what? I'll go do a master's in engineering. I still got to the same outcome, which is to work for a top consulting firm. Who knows what will happen to your life? So there's no compromise. Do the best you can and be happy with what you got. That's what you are capable of at that time. But don't be happy that this is all you can get. Keep trying harder to get to the next stage.
So, one of the questions that we've got is there's so much choice in the market. How do you even make a choice of where to go? Pramath, if you want to answer that.
Just apply everywhere and let them choose. That's what I tell you. Your choice gets narrow after people send you reject letters, right?
No, but if you want to really look at it
I'm
strategically,
joking.
Yeah. So what are the things you would look at? I mean, you've already alluded to some of them. What's the faculty? Who are the people who are running the program? What kind of infrastructure, campus, and so on? But is there anything else that you'd look at while making?
Well, obviously, I didn't mention where alums are.
Which is so important.
Yeah. Now, clearly, this is when you have. I didn't mention it because when you have a new program like Badruka, you don't have alums.
Yeah, but no, actually, Badruka has 50,000 alums. If you look at it,
but not from the particular program.
Yes.
So the alums give the credibility to the institution that yes, these are serious people. This is a credible institution. But obviously, you can't have a track record for the program. I don't know. I think Divya and Sanjay might be able to add to that. I think I mentioned most of the things that I would look at.
So, I think I was also going to add to the fact that alumni network is really
very important. Yeah.
And I think you had a question, Nidhi, you were asking Pramath about the residential program. And if you're in a residential program, right, you really build your connects there, and alum network really stems from there. I look at, and Pramath is being one of the examples. I look at the IIT graduates, right? They all were in the residential program, obviously, smaller group. And I see their connects 30 years, 35 years later also, their connect is so strong. And I, unfortunately, didn't do any residential program either for my MBA or for my undergrad. And that's one big regret that I have. I think connect you make is unparalleled.
Actually, I'm a flag bearer of that. I did the residential MBA program, right? And I wouldn't change that for anything. Yeah. The friends and the connects that you make are just unparalleled. I can pick up the phone and call anybody I want. But also, the residential program really helped, internalize the self-reflection happened during that time, because you're so sort of insulated from everything else. So what Pramath was talking about, one of the types of learning, the self-reflection, that really happened at the
You're not distracted. You're not distracted by jobs. You're not distracted by family. You're not distracted by any other commitment. You are there. You're just 100% there with
focused
your peers
on,
focused.
Yeah.
And I would just say, if I had a chance and I had to do it over again, I would definitely do a residential program.
I think we are running out of time. I'm going to ask one last question. Pramath, this is sort of addressed to you. If a student fails to secure the best in class, is that the end of his career or her career? How will you help in navigate and motivating young people who don't do so well or don't score well in particular exams? How do you get over that?
Well, I've been a victim of that. I mean, people might think I'm being overly humble, but it is true that at every stage in life, I felt like I didn't do well in exams. I could have done better. We all feel that, right? So you may turn to me and say, oh, there's a guy who went to IIT Kanpur and he's saying he didn't do well in exam. But it's true. I mean, when I went to IIT Kanpur, I was ragged and I was told that my rank was like a telephone number. Because I was one of the lowest rankers in that context. And I felt like stupid because everybody was such a high ranker relative to me. I was one of the few of the lowest rankers at Kanpur in that year. I think scores don't make you. I think everybody you will talk to will tell you that your rank, your marks, your grades don't decide your future. While it is also true that they do decide sometimes what you do next, what you study next. And that's what I was trying to say earlier. You have to be realistic about what your grades will get you. Be practical and realistic. Don't aim for the moon when you know you can't even jump, right? So you get the best you can for the grades you have, the marks you have, if they are the only criteria which are going to determine your next step. And then when you take that next step, then you work really hard to do well. I'll give you an example. My grades at IIT were really bad. In my first semester, I got C's and D's because I fell sick. And in a CGPA system, it's all cumulative. So if your first semester grades are really bad, you start there and you have to work your way up. And it's an uphill task. If you've got C's and D's in your first class, forget ending up at a decent, in your first semester, forget ending up. Now, in my department, the topper always went to MIT. The second guy in the department went to Berkeley. And the third guy would go to Stanford in metallurgical engineering. And there were about 20 of us. When I got in, I thought I had a fancy chance of going to these three places. First year grades, I knew I was not going to go to Stanford, Berkeley, or MIT, which were my dream schools. Now you think that I may be aspiring for the moon, but the truth is, first semester, I knew I'm finished. I can't do this. I worked my way through the 4 years. Like I told you, I tried to do an MBA, didn't get it. One of my professors said, UPenn is not a great engineering school, but it's a great department. Let me see if I can write a recommendation and get you there. Now, I got in there, and it was not a great engineering school. Most of my friends thought that I was taking a lightweight degree while I was going there. But you know what? When I went there, I was so determined to change the narrative that I had about myself, about my grades and so on, that I worked my butt off. For 5 years, I really worked my butt off, right? And that completely changed my trajectory. So it was not the best school in engineering. Today, Penn may be seen as a Ivy League and all that. But the truth is, let me tell you that in those days in IIT Kanpur, Penn was not such a great engineering program. It was okay, right? Pramath ka ho gaya, lucky professor ne recommendation diya, ho gaya. But once I got there, right, I worked my butt off. And that's what then determined everything that happened later. And in fact, my job at McKinsey happened because people said, oh, this is an engineer who did it from a liberal arts college. And that became my strength, that I had not gone to a very pure tech place, but I had gone to a broader place. And I, of course, was able to talk about how I had taken classes in philosophy and psychology and so on, which played out in a very positive way. So I think making the best of whatever you deserve, despite your bad rank, marks, grades, is really the lesson I have learned. So absolutely shouldn't be disheartened with bad scores and marks.
Thank you so much. I think we are completely out of time. There are so many more questions. There's somebody who's asking about an online MBA versus a full-time MBA, 1 year MBA versus 2 year. What kind of roles can you expect after completing the MBA program at BSM, so on and so forth. So what we'll do is we will get the team to answer some of these questions. If you leave us with your email, then we'll get the team to answer some of these questions and we'll send you these answers. But thank you so much, our panelists for today. If there are any closing remarks any of you would like to give, Divya, Sanjay, if there are any closing remarks that you have, but thanks so much for being here.
So Nidhi, I have a similar story as Pramath, but Pramath's story is more about IIT. Mine is more high school. So I was a very average, I would call myself a below average student. And that too, because I was like I was rebelling against my parents, forcing me to study science. So I was determined to prove them wrong. And I was, obviously it hurt me, but I was a very, very average student, right? Barely passed my biology, and my teacher even calling my mom and saying, "Ye to pass bhi nahi hogi." But then I had an opportunity. We moved to US, and my dad at that point realized there's no point forcing. These kids have to figure out what they want to do. And I think when I got into my engineering and I moved to US, it was my desire. It came from within me that I want to do well. So just because I had done and been a really average student in school, it didn't stop me when I was focused and I was determined what I want to do. So I also really worked very hard when I did my undergrad and, followed what I wanted to do. So I would say don't get discouraged by poor grades.
Thanks, Divya. Sanjay, any closing remarks?
Not specifically, Nidhi, but all I would say is that I'm a big believer in the India story. I think all the youngsters today going for their MBAs or whatever programs, they have a bright future ahead. And like I mentioned, the 10-90, right? So 10 is what is given to you, 90 is what you make of it. So I wish all of them all the best. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Pramath, any last closing remarks from you?
I think I've already talked too much and made us exceed our time. But I would just say that I have come to believe that human beings have potential that goes way beyond any test, any score, any program can measure. We've discovered AI, but we haven't discovered a system that is truly able to discover what is Divya's true potential and what is Sanjay's true potential. And I can tell you that they have still not achieved that true potential. I can test that and vouch for that. But there is no system in the world that will be able to judge what potential people have. So I think if we can just all believe in that, and this is not some motivational speech I'm giving. If you just look at everybody's trajectory, they've all reached where they could have never imagined that they could have reached, right? Even the people who are on this call, without knowing them, I think if all of them just thought back 5 years back, 10 years back, where they were and where they are today, and would they have imagined that they would be where they are, they would be surprised talking to their 5-year-old previous self or 10-year previous self. So I like to end with that I really think that believing in your true potential will take you very far. And that's the exciting part about life anyway.
Thanks a lot, Pramath. On that note, thank you everybody for joining us. Really appreciate it. And we'll chat more on more webinars and more such sort of freewheeling discussions. So looking forward to having the audience with us back again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pramath, Divya.
Thank you.